Today, I have an incredible human, and I get to introduce you again. And I love having this guest on our podcast. It's my husband, Thaddeus Owen, and I love the conversations that he and I have. And what I asked him to do today was come on to the podcast and have a real conversation about social media. And this podcast is actually really near and dear to my heart. I'm going to be sharing some information about things that have happened in my past and how social media has played a big part of some destructive family behaviors in my life. And Thaddeus is always looking and seeking and exploring and expanding. And the conversations that we get to have in private, I like, honestly, like usually we're joking around and we're fucking around and being all like funny on my podcast, but this is actually serious. And in this episode, we have our children, because this is so near and dear to my heart, and I feel vehemently about this subject matter. We have our children in the audience, and so we have our Fielding and we have an Artemisia, and they're listening to what we are going to be teaching, what Thaddeus is going to be teaching everybody today about social media, about this new Wild West exploration, experiment of TikTok, of Facebook, and not to go down, and I want to reiterate this too, like not to go down and be in a deep well of a rabbit hole, but to explore and really look at as an observer from like 60,000 foot perspective, like how are we managing this? How are parents supposed to navigate this new Wild West territory of social media, and what is it doing to our children, and what's it doing to their brains, and how is it stealing, like they're living their life away from them, and what can we do about it, right? And so like I want Thaddeus to just share everything he's uncovering and make us more aware on a spiritual level of what is happening, because you guys, this is a slow drip, and the slow drip has been like bringing out the Nintendo, bringing out the Atari, all the video games in our past. And here we are, right? And what's our life going to be like in 10 years? So we're going to get into it. We're going to deep dive, and we're going to be observers, and we're going to teach our children. I'm going to try not to have too many tears, but this is actually really close to my heart. So Thaddeus, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, taking time out of your busy life. I know we all have busy lives, and I just think that how you synthesize information is really important and really spectacular. And a lot of people can learn just even listening to you for 5 minutes. People are like enamored by what you say and how you say it. So thank you so much for coming.
All right. Great to be here.
All right. So let's get into it. So Thaddeus and I are going to have a conversation. And if anybody on YouTube wants to add a comment, put it in the chat and put it in all caps. And here we go. All right. So dopamine, the next generation of users. So back when we were kids in the 90s, when somebody talked about being a user, it was someone who's addicted to heroin, in my mind. Like that's the first thing that comes to my mind. And what happens when we are users, right? Or when somebody is a user, they're doing something different to their brain chemistry, right? So dopamine comes into play, serotonin, all these different brain chemicals. So being a user, how is that playing out in this next generation of new users? So let's get into it.
Well, I think what we're talking about is when, like in the 80s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, users were drug users. It's not just heroin, but like people that used or abused drugs for some purpose, and typically an addictive use was considered a user. But now everyone, not just kids, but adults included, is considered a quote unquote user of different technologies online. And those can be anything from video games to social media. And I think that's the convergence we're talking about today, is this convergence right now of the social media space and video games where, there's this culture being created of people that quote unquote use or consume the information and the things that are being put in front of them without being producers of anything. And that concept, that was much harder when we were children, because there might have been video games, but typically they weren't all encompassing video games that sucked us in all day long. Now, that might have been true for a small handful of people, but certainly not a majority. We were still getting outside, engaging with books, engaging in discourse and discussions, and learning in school in a way that took time. And now the video game and social media culture are bite-sized pieces of, 10 to 50 seconds of information before the next thing is presented. And I think that culture that's being created is what we're going to talk through today, and how that is affecting everybody, not just kids.
Yeah, it's insidious, right? Like, it's not just our children, but I think that our children are growing up with not knowing the before and after. Like, we talk about this all the time too. Like, we get to experience in our lives, like, the before and the after of this new generation, right? Of social media. And we know what it's like growing up without it. So we have that, level of discernment, and our kids are growing up without that. So how do you think that is, like, what's the difference in that? And like, how do you see that playing out?
So, yeah. And the way that I'm thinking about this is start with social media. So you're like a user of Facebook or a user of TikTok, and each of those platforms have billions of users each. And we did not have such platforms when we were younger. So we had, some video games, but because there wasn't online connectivity, whatever video game you had in your, bedroom or your family room, that was what you were limited to. You couldn't go out and download another one in 10 seconds. You had 4, maybe 8 video games. And like, unless you wanted to play them over and over and over, you would play them and complete them and go do something else. And they weren't as engaging and as exciting. So what we experienced is we would sit down with a book. And I mean, just for example, when I first started working in my career life, I did not have necessarily the internet in the way that we have it today. So for example, if I had to look up why this thing at work, so I worked in pharmaceuticals at first, so I had to make these large batches of pharmaceutical drugs, and they would fail, and they would turn colors. They'd supposed to be white and they turned pink, or everything that was supposed to be mixed together would fall apart, and you couldn't sell that. So I had to figure out why. And there would be a library at work, and we had to go to the library and pull books down and look up why something failed and read about it and learn about the theory of how mixing actually occurs and apply that to our circumstance by thinking about it, writing things down, drawing diagrams, talking with other people to figure out what their experience was of how they fixed something like that in the past. So this physical, tactile reviewing, reading, and gaining knowledge was done in long periods of intense concentration. And now what's happening is we are seeing, and it's very noticeable to us in the older generation now, because when we were younger, we didn't have such things, that everything is coming in bite-sized pieces in 30-second sound clips. And what is being pushed in those sound clips is not necessarily what you as a man or a woman want to know. So for example, I needed to figure out why my pharmaceutical batch was failing. So I had to go into study and figure that out. And now I had that knowledge forever, and I can use it in other situations and circumstances. For example, I want to make a batch of soap at home because I no longer work in pharmaceuticals, but based on the knowledge of what I learned by doing that study, I can figure out how to make a better batch of soap because I learned something that was significant that I can take with me forever. Now what's happening is when we get a 30-second soundbite, followed by another 30-second soundbite, followed by a 10-second soundbite on a platform like TikTok or a YouTube Reel, or
Short.
YouTube Short and an Instagram Reel, then what's being fed to us is not something we're going out and searching for. There's an algorithm embedded within the social media that reads your personality and pushes a narrative for you to consume that they think will keep you on the social media app longer, not necessarily something that's going to give you information that helps you in life. And that is the distinguishing point where, let's just say that somebody wants to push that there is a war in Bulgaria and they want everyone to know about it and to be thinking about that. I don't know anything about Bulgaria personally, and I wouldn't go out and start researching it unless there was some really specific reason. And if I did, I would go and find books, I would find encyclopedias from earlier times to learn about its history. But instead, this war in Bulgaria, which is not what's happening. I don't know of any war in Bulgaria, but this is an example if they wanted to push the narrative of a war in Bulgaria to the consciousness and have everyone focused on that, because focus is energy, and everything in this world at its fundamental level is energy. And if all the energy of the people is focused on one thing, there's magic in that. So now all the memes and all the presenters that are being pushed to your 30-second sound bites on your social media over and over are putting these 30-second snapshots of the Bulgarian war and the colors of the war. And that starts getting embedded in your subconscious and your conscious, because if I show you a picture of a pink elephant, you can't not think about a pink elephant. You will be thinking about that. And so when you're being shown the sound bites, number one, or video bites, I would call them now. And I think TikTok's actual company name is Dance Bite, Byte. So when you're being shown
Bite Dance,
thanks. So when you're being shown these clips and they're quick, number one, for people like us that have been trained in longer form learning and focus, we have the ability to focus for long periods of time and digest information and critically understand how that information applies to our life and what we want to do with it and put pieces together. When you are shown 30-second sound bites over and over from the time you were young, you no longer have the ability to digest long form information, which means you have no ability to put reasoning together over the long term of how things apply, how they fit together. You are being shown flashes of information that come in and out and begin to subtly program your subconscious into what it is you think about, what it is you want to do in the future, and the way your future will be shaped.
I'm going to take a teaching moment for a second, and I'm going to encourage our children, who I can see they're writing notes at this juncture. I would prefer that you guys look up and you're watching Thaddeus and you're watching us. Feeling, are you hearing, listening? Yeah. As he's still writing. So stop writing. Okay. I want you guys present, and I want you to be thinking about and really listen and let it sink in. Because when you're writing, you're doing something separate than complete focused listening. Okay. So I want you guys focused listening, and then in between, like if you guys have to write something down, just write one thing, and then you can go back to it later. Okay. So if you really needs to write something down, or you can ask us later, but I want you guys here focused and present. Okay. So we're dealing with TikTok. Let's just take TikTok for a moment. And you guys both are on TikTok, right? Yep. Fielding and Artie. Okay. So they have these profiles on their phones, and TikTok is a Chinese company, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then, so how are they manipulating our children? And Fielding, I like another teaching moment. Sorry, you guys. You know what? Because I'm a teacher, and this is live, and this is real life, and my podcast is about being a real human. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend that, I'm not a parent, and I'm not an active, like, conscious parent, because I teach people about conscious parenting. So we're right here, and I want you guys, the whole part of this is you guys listening to this, right? And letting it sink in and really hearing every moment of it. So please stop writing and be present. Thank you. Okay. So back to TikTok. TikTok is a Chinese-run company, and it's ByteDance.ly. ByteDance. And
it used to be Musical.ly or music.ly.
Music.ly. Okay. Can you talk to us, Thaddeus, about to the children about the psychological profiling and the addiction factor of TikTok, just a little bit more in depth, in not just all the platforms, but that one specifically?
Okay, so TikTok has over 1 billion users. That's a lot of users. When you imagine, they tell us there's 7 billion, roughly, I think there's 6 billion something people in the world. So that's a lot of people, like, in the world. There's only 300 and some million in the US alone, and that includes men, women, and children. So a lot of users are on that platform. And what I'm told is there are 1 billion videos watched or produced every single day just on TikTok.
Okay, let's just let that sink in for a minute. 1 billion videos every single day that are watched by TikTok users. You'll remember that. You don't need to write it down.
So what I'm thinking with the 1 billion number is there's so many videos, so much data, but is anyone actually learning anything and forwarding their their actual self in this life? So when I think about, so let's just go back to TikTok, but when I think about living a life on this plane, planet, sphere, matrix, whatever we're in, when you get to our age, when you're closer to 50 than you are any other number, and you're getting closer to that end part of the lifetime we spend here in this particular life, what will you have accomplished when you get to that point? So will you get there and have watched TikTok videos and played video games, and then get to the end of your life and wonder what the life was all for and what actually happened? Because most kids, they say that they look at user profiles. Again, they keep using this word user, right? Like a drug user, but they look at user profiles from the age of 16 and up. And then they use those as the numbers of people using TikTok, for example. But my son is not 16, he's much younger, and he's on TikTok. So I'm sure many of his friends, or maybe all of his friends, are most of your friends on TikTok? So the answer is yes. So that's at the age group of 12. So the people using TikTok are not just adults or young adults or older teenagers, it's very young people. So when you grow up using those applications, typically, just like what I see with what I call the older people in our neighborhood and our lives, they read the newspaper still to this day. Like, I'm never going to read a newspaper, number one, because the information in it is largely incorrect unless it's purely local. And even then, we have friends who were in the stories that were being talked about and said that's not actually what happened. So why would I read that information? But those people grew up on reading the newspaper, and they still do it. So if you're growing up as a TikTok quote unquote user, when you're in your 20s and 30s, where are you going to get your news and information? From that same platform you're comfortable with today. So they're basically growing an entire generation of people that will be TikTok. I'm trying to think of a better word to say than users, but TikTok information gatherers on how they view the world.
Wait,
so
what did we hear earlier today? Something about the eaters. What was that?
Well,
useless eater.
So we haven't gotten into that.
Okay.
But so as you acquire your information in these sound bites that are pushed to you, and why does somebody on TikTok make a video?
Wait, are you saying soundbite? Are you saying like the video?
Yeah.
Okay, so isn't it?
But
why would it be just soundbite?
Well, because it's what you're hearing in terms of news, but it's also what you're seeing in terms of imagery.
Okay.
And typically what's being pushed is what's popular. And that's what people want to see. And what's popular is what's presented to influencers, and they get paid to present those ideas. And then other people recreate them and push them further. So largely, in my opinion, what people are seeing on TikTok is what you are being controlled to see and consume. And we know that that's a fact. Number one, you can look up news. This is the year 2022, so earlier this year, the White House in the United States was paying and telling Instagram influencers what they wanted them to say on Instagram. So these are the people that have millions and millions of followers that then everyone else consumes and republishes that information as their own. So that information you're seeing on TikTok and the social media platforms over and over is typically what people in control of the way the world is moving want you to see and to consume, because they're paying the influencers who get paid to be on social media. They get paid by companies to market and advertise ideas and products to you. They want you to become consumers of the mindset in the way that people want the world to go. And they want you to be consumers of products that they're selling, because there's a really good quote, and I think it was Bernays who invented certain forms of advertising. And he's saying that as we can influence all these people to buy things, their money, their ability to have freedom in their life disappears. Right now, we have so much freedom to fly all over the world and do whatever. You could make money working at McDonald's, making $20 an hour these days. And you could buy a car, have an apartment, and travel the world after working for 2 years as a young person with no kids. But instead, the consumerism that's pushed through the advertising and marketing, largely now through social media, gets you to spend all of your excess money that you could be using for things to give you a life and buy trinkets, cheap trinkets that fill your homes and your lives with things that they want you to have, or ephemeral experiences like watching a movie, paying for these movies and these services and these apps that are increasingly costing money. And then you have no money left over for actual freedom. So TikTok, going back to TikTok, it's one of the most insidious social media programs, which is why we're talking about it. And that's because, number one, it's Chinese based, and China gets to not play by Western laws and rules around human rights and around extracting data for political or mental progression of the way they want things to happen.
Okay, why is that? Like, can you explain that a little bit more? Because like even I don't quite get that.
In the US, there are laws on the way that you can use private data.
Oh, private data. Okay.
And we also have human rights laws that don't let you use child labor, for example, or forced labor.
Oh.
China doesn't have those laws. So China can take your data, your private data, through their app, TikTok, and they can use it in ways that would not be allowable in the Western countries.
Okay, I just saw my daughter look at me and go like, she's confused. Like she was like, what? Okay, so why does that matter? Because sometimes I go back and forth on like, well, I don't really do anything. Like I'm not like a criminal, you know what I mean? I'm just like, why do I care so much that they're taking my data? But then other times I'm like, wait, that's my personal information. And why is it okay? And then we can get into the opt-in stuff too in a little bit. But what's like the biggest thing that these people that you're teaching right now, like what do they need to know about that, Thaddeus? Like what's the most important thing?
So you're saying you have nothing to hide, so who cares? And now you truly have nothing to hide because you gave away all your data.
Right.
So you have no privacy. You have no privacy. Your phone comes with you to the bathroom. Your phone comes with you to bed. Your phone comes with you in your car. It's the number one thing that people freak out about if they leave home without it. Not their wallet, not their spouse or their boyfriend, their phone.
Baby, I would freak out if you didn't come with me.
Not as much as your phone.
Maybe.
So people say they have nothing to hide, and now truly you can't hide anything because you're willingly giving away private data, and it is absolutely meaningless if the world never changes from today. It will be used to market you products because they have built a profile on you that they now understand how you think, what you think about, and what you're going to want tomorrow. So they can present that to you to purchase, to use your hard-earned money to buy those things so that you never actually obtain your freedom because you're too busy spending your money on the stuff they market to you. Now that's today. In the future, if we have more of a state like China, where your social credit score determines whether you have money, or you can ride on public transportation, or whether your car will actually start when you push the start button in the morning. That data that you've already given away because you have nothing to hide will be used against you when those things come into play in the future.
That's terrifying. Like, I just saw the look in my daughter's eye and she's like, what? Like, I didn't know this.
Everything's going to electric vehicles. Those vehicles have kill switches and they're connected via the internet to central computers at all times, which means if your social credit score is not where it needs to be, you cannot operate your car.
Can you just talk super quick about social credit score? Because I don't think these guys even know the concept. And it's not like this is a joke or anything either, you guys. Like, this is actually present in our world today. Like, it's in place. It's already in place. This is not like some time off in the future.
So this is how and I don't like to say people in control, but there are people at higher levels that control the data. So let's just say the people in control of the data, they get to create a computer program that gives you a rating. Just like on Airbnb, you get like a 5-star rating as an Airbnb guest, or a 2-star rating. Or you look at Google reviews, that rating will be next to your name, and it will determine in the future, potentially, if this system comes into place, which again, it's already in place in China. Once that system, or when that system is in place, that score will determine whether you have money in the bank account, how much money you make in your job, whether you can drive your car, whether you can enter certain buildings, or whether you can even leave your home. Is all can be based on that score, based on data you're giving away today. Why? Because TikTok specifically, in the user agreement, which nobody reads, and even if you do, it's so long, number one, they are allowed to take your facial profile and store it and use it, which means they can create AI called deepfake. And there's something in Facebook called deep face, but there's a deep fake, which is an AI version of you. And they are allowed to take that data, a Chinese-based company, and utilize it any way they want. Number two.
Wait, so they could make a CGI?
They could. It's called deep fake. You can look that up. I just was looking it up before this.
Okay.
And I'm like, I thought deep fake was like something fictitious, but it's actually what TikTok uses. And Facebook uses the deep face, which is the facial recognition software. But TikTok goes further and they take your face that moves and shows different expressions in a video format, a live format, not a photo, and they get to keep and render that in any way they want. That's just one way that they're taking your private data forever. Now, with the AI they have today, they could then show you with your voice, because that's the other thing that they are allowed to own, is your voice that's captured in the TikTok software. So they get to capture your video image of your face and your voice. Now they can animate an AI version of you. And let's just say they wanted to show you robbing a bank. It's your voice, it's your face, it's on camera. There is no denying that that would be you if you don't have witnesses of where you are at any one time. That's just a for example. They can do things like that now because they own your voice and your face and your movement. The other thing that they collect that ties into social credit scoring is they collect everything you do on the app, not limited to what you do that you post. That means if, let's just say you're 12 and you're fooling around with friends on TikTok and you compose a message or a video and you're just screwing around and you're like, I'm going to make this video about, the Nazi flag and about how Nazis are awesome and we're going to kid around, but we're never going to publish it. We just keep deleting it. We just keep writing it. We think it's funny and we delete it. They are allowed to capture things you delete, and they're allowed to capture things that you compose in draft and erase immediately without posting. That is allowable for them. It not allowable. They capture that in the data they collect about you, is drafted TikTok videos that you don't post or ever hit send, but that you in fact delete with no intention of posting. That is now going to be built into your profile that they're collecting for you.
Do you guys see the look on my face right now? Those of you on the podcast, their children are nodding yes because my jaw is literally on the ground. So you read this in the...
I just read this and I think it was the Wired. It was either, there were like 3 articles specifically on TikTok. So TikTok was banned by Biden administration for the use by TSA and the military because it's so insidious that they are not allowed to use TikTok.
Wait a minute. Our government banned this for the military, anyone in the military and in the government,
TSA, Transportation Security Administration,
because it's so insidious and data collection.
And unsafe because it's a Chinese-based company for secrets and collecting of data.
And this company can take all that information from your drafts, deleted videos, and do anything they want with it, with your face, with, that's okay. Feeling, could you hit that light, the middle, it's the middle button? Yep. Okay. And do whatever they want with it. They can make a CGI person, an AI, artificial intelligence person with your face. Like, this is really interesting and creepy. That is. And it's so important that we're getting this information out. So just keep going.
So people can look up deep fake. And I thought that was a fictitious book, and I think it is, but it was I think it was the Wired magazine. It was one of those three that I looked at. And so it was like, what's wrong with TikTok and why do people think it's so dangerous?
Okay, so wait, is it just TikTok that can do that? Or can Facebook do the same thing? Can Instagram and YouTube?
That's not in their user agreements. It's in the user agreement of TikTok that they own drafts and composition of your TikTok videos that you decide to not post and just erase.
Okay, so here's where my mind is going right now. That's just what they're putting in the user agreement. What are they doing with stuff that they're not even putting in there?
So there's two things that we presume are happening. Number one, we were throwing around this term from the Crow 777 episode around social media. They had a 2-part episode, so 4 hours, where they went through all the social media from Facebook to Instagram to TikTok. It was really good. And what they used was this term dossier. So there's a dossier, which is just a file. It's a file created about you specifically and everything you've done that's in the public sphere. And that file will then have this TikTok data, your Facebook profiles, all these things. But with TikTok, they get your voice, they get your video of your face, and they get things that you deleted and never intended to publish. So if you're using their platform at all, they now have access to that. So that file continues to grow. And then if they ever want to use that file for something against you, they've got a lot of information. That information is also composed of other people's cell phones. So for instance, if you went to the grocery store and you did not bring your cell phone, and someone might have a video of you as part of your private file that is being kept in the data sphere that shows you at the grocery store. Why? Because someone else was filming a video at the grocery store of themselves for TikTok and you were in the background, or for Instagram or for Facebook, or they just took it out and snapped a photo, or they just brought their phone out of their pocket to use the calculator app. But there's software in there that probably is using your video camera to capture data, and it saw you. And because there's facial recognition software through Facebook and TikTok, they know who you are. So they captured your image, they identified exactly who that person was, they added to their file of where they were, what they were doing, and you never posted anything about that. So that's number one, is just the video apps are allowed to triangulate. And somebody did a research project just with Instagram, and they showed someone taking a selfie of them on Instagram. So here's their selfie on Instagram. It just shows their Instagram photo that's on their profile. Mm-hmm. And then they created an AI to go through every other Instagram and Facebook video and photo from the same day in the same location. And they found somebody else's phone showing a photo of you in the background taking your Instagram selfie for that photo. So that means that you are on other people's phones and they are providing data about you unintentionally into that private file. Number two, your phone.
And they can do that because the camera's on both sides.
The camera's on both sides, but that person might have been taking a photo of, let's just say it's a sporting event, and they take a photo of the field, but there you are in the stands in their photo taking your Instagram photo. There's so many cameras in people's hands, and people are videoing and taking photos so often that they can almost always find you taking your Instagram selfie from somebody else's phone of something they published, and it's publicly available.
That is so creepy.
There's a whole article where this lady did that for a research project, and it is crazy how they could show that.
Do you know where people can find that?
They'd have to look it up. They could probably just search for.
What are the keywords?
I would just search for Instagram selfie photo from someone else's phone, something like that. I don't remember the name of the article, but I remember it was like, holy cow, like you can see data of yourself because of the recognition software that's out there, where they tag you in a photo of someone else that doesn't even know you. So the second thing that they're able to do is, unlike most people, we keep our phones in airplane mode in a Faraday cage pouch, or we don't bring them with us. Most people have their phone on them always, and it's on Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and cellular data at all times to never miss any possible notification on any system that they're around. Well,
wait, don't forget your wrist. Oh my God, they just travel around with it everywhere they go.
That's the Apple Watch, yeah. But think about your phone being connected to Bluetooth. That means it's discoverable by other devices. You don't just have Bluetooth on to find a speaker that you connect to. Once your Bluetooth is enabled on your phone, other devices can discover your Bluetooth and connect to it without you knowing. That happens all the time. And that ability of the Wi-Fi, the cell data, and the Bluetooth, think about in a crowd of people at a supermarket or a sporting event, how many cell phones are in pockets? And that means my cell phone, if it was in my pocket and turned on, is connecting to the person next to me who I don't know. And they're talking to each other saying, this person is here, they're next to this other person, they're both at this sporting event. That data is being captured. So they know whose cell phone is registered to who. They know that your Bluetooth and this other person's Bluetooth were directly next to each other, and probably how close and where you were at any given time of the day. That means when you travel around, of course, with your Apple Watch, but your cell phone in your pocket turned on, now not only is the GPS tracking location of your cell phone feeding data, but the Bluetooth version is telling who you were next to, who you were talking to, where you were at all moments of the day. And the TikTok draft you deleted with the Bluetooth left on your cell phone telling everyone where you were is feeding your social profile.
Did you guys have any idea, my audience, any idea about any of this stuff? Are you learning so much right now? This is such good information. Thaddeus, at what point do we go, if we were just sitting here and not even podcasting, I'd be asking you this question. At what point do we go so far into the rabbit hole? Like, are we down in the bog right now with all of this stuff? Or is this information like it's been suppressed and we just don't know because it's such a new frontier? Like, what is happening to our freedom? I have so many questions. Like, how do we navigate in and out of the bog? And could you explain the bog just a little bit so people can get the different perspectives on, like, I don't know, just like going down conspiracy rabbit holes, right? And coming out for a breath of fresh air and going, okay, I'm not going to attach too much to this because I have a level of discernment and detachment from some of the stuff. Or is this something like, do you feel it's imperative that, like our audience needs to know this stuff, other parents need to know this stuff? Like, what's the balance here? Is it?
So the question is, like, the bog, you can get stuck chasing conspiracy theories all the way to their end without furthering your life path and your life goals. And you need to ascend yourself and work on yourself and your spirit rather than chase conspiracy theories. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is all information that is true and is out there, and you can read it in the manuals, the user agreements of all the software. The social credit score is already here in China.
Is it in other countries too? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Is it just China? Or
so the social credit score is already here in China. It is already, I believe it was France that has a law now for implementing social credit score. And it is already in the United States. So we already have a social credit score here. I think it's called My Life. You can look it up and you can find your social credit score. I don't know that it was worth you searching yourself, because it feeds more data to the system when you find yourself and self-identify who you are in that system. It makes the AI better, but you already have a social credit score here. It's just not turned on for daily use where you're seeing it as publicly as you would in China. Now, you also already have a social credit score here in this country, because if you use the Uber app or the Lyft app, you're already being rated. If you use the Airbnb app, you already have a social credit rating in their system where you have reviews listed about you as a person, and you have a star system rating you. So you can say all day long that, oh, it's a conspiracy theory, it's never coming. It's already here. And in the future, it is going to be more available for everyone to get that data. And I guarantee that it will be used for you to access things in the future, which means if you're not paying attention to what you're doing today around the social credit score, then it's going to be a huge challenge for you to navigate the world of the future.
Okay, so what if there's, another group of people that are going, well, isn't that a good thing? And this is not my opinion, but is this a good thing for society to like keep tabs on each other? And like, are there benefits to that? Or is that like, do you see it in your perspective? Do you see it as a complete, like, extraction of our freedom? Or like, where do you kind of land on that?
Who gets to make the decision of what gets a higher rating than another, and who gets to make the decision of what's a negative rating? So people's opinions begin to play into that. It's a subjective thing. Who says that today talking negatively about, let's just say, the Ukraine is a bad thing? That's a bad thing. So you could have a lower social credit rating if you have something negative to say about the Ukraine and something positive to say about Russia. But was it World War I or World War II, when Russia was our ally, you would have lots of good things to say because we were working with them to get something done. So that means your opinion of something could lead you to a higher score or a lower score based on whoever writes the algorithm, the way that they determine what's right and wrong. Now one small group of people get to make the determinations of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And that acceptability gets you access or removes access to daily life.
And daily life means like the God-given things that we not should, but like how do you like render that? Like, shouldn't we all have access to grocery stores and schooling and like all of that? Like, how do you know what I'm saying?
Oh, they don't in China. We already know that. And if you're in prison because you did something that wasn't socially acceptable, like sold weed, then you also don't have access to those things. So in the future,
right,
you don't have to have a prison that locks you behind fences. You have a prison that bars you from entry into public life, which is use of the internet, use of your vehicle, and use of the services that are provided for us, like grocery stores.
And that's already in place in China. And then you said coming to France, or it's in France, and then
I think it's France. Yeah. So
hold on a second. You guys let that sink in for just a second. Like let's take a moment and like just let that sink in and feel that in your body, feel it in your brain, and think about like, where are we headed? Where is all of this taking us? Because we are so busy in our daily lives, and this stuff gets skipped over, right? Or we don't know about it. People don't want you to know about it. And how does it affect you now that you know about it? Like how do we cognate that? Right? And like, what can we do about it? I guess I'd like to get into some of those things toward the end, Thaddeus, but do you have more you want to talk about with Facebook in the insidiousness of that?
So it's just being aware of someone who is on those social media platforms.
Yeah, but everybody's on them.
Not everybody.
Just if you're not on them, then you like live out in the country somewhere and you barely have any communication. Like you're not in business. So it's like people in older generations or like babies. They're the only people that aren't on them.
Well, not exactly, but that's
okay,
like,
so tell me I'm wrong.
Yeah. So for instance, like the company that I work for is probably not on Facebook and they still make plenty of money.
Wait a minute, but everybody in the company's on it.
But the company itself is not using it for their business. So if you're a business, I would argue you definitely don't have to be on Facebook. Like the drywall contractor that I just hired to do some drywalling and give me a quote, He's definitely not on Facebook, Instagram, or anywhere. Like, doesn't exist. So I think it's possible. And I know that like Crow from Crow 777 Radio is not on any social media platforms. The Crow show is, because let's say Rose might post something there, but Crow himself has no profiles on any of those. So
well, hold on. So, but he uses the internet,
for sure.
and his voice is on the internet.
Yep. I'm not saying the internet. I'm saying social media platforms.
Okay.
So I think you have to make a choice of Facebook. If you saw what happened in the last month, Facebook lost tons of market share and billions of dollars to TikTok. So you can see that Facebook is the number one social media platform today, but it will be eclipsed almost certainly by something like TikTok or whatever the new version of TikTok is in the very near future. So you don't have to participate in those things. And potentially in the future, if you're not somebody who wants to utilize those services, you might not get a social credit score potentially formed for you, which means you wouldn't get access to those services without the score.
How does that sit with you guys? How does it sit with you not getting access to grocery stores, to gas, to being able to like go places? And I mean, if that's not the biggest strike against freedom, I don't even know.
So we'd have to decide, like, at some point, some people might have to decide if you want access to those services or not. You certainly don't need access to the gas station, the grocery store to live and to eat and to move around.
But you do to be comfortable.
No, not necessarily. The Amish don't have those things. And I would say that they're pretty comfortable. They live a different lifestyle. And so there will be a group of people that decide they don't want to live in the wall of Saudi Arabia, which is whatever, 180 story tall building that is horizontally created for miles, two buildings facing each other. So everything happens in between. It's neat to watch. One of the princes of Saudi Arabia, that's his design, is put everyone inside a walled city, which is kind of crazy.
Sounds awesome.
But there'll be people living outside of that walled city that don't get access to those services, and they would live a different lifestyle. And I don't know that it will come to that much of a dichotomy or not, but there's definitely Jason Brashears from Archaic's channel. If you watch some of his stuff, he's blown up recently, and his idea, based on all the data he can find in historical books from hundreds of years old up to present, is that there is going to be an event in 2023 that recreates the internet with access controlled only via something like a social credit score or a central bank digital currency. So these types of things are becoming more of a reality.
If you want to be a corporate escape artist, head on over to howtoescapecorporate.com and sign up for the How to Escape Corporate Without Leaving Your Job course. Learn the exact methods to go from employee to entrepreneur. Turn your corporate existence into a corporate wonderland. It's time to take action. Howtoescapecorporate.com. Remember, members get the full-length podcast over at howtoescapecorporate.substack.com. Become a member for $8 a month for the full podcast and members-only articles and videos.